When Sean Combs was finally arrested by federal authorities after months of escalating lawsuits, disturbing allegations, and whispers that refused to die, the world didn't react with shock. It reacted with a strange sense of inevitability, as if everyone had been subconsciously preparing for this moment for years. Because if there was one thing Diddy had always been surrounded by, it wasn't just success or fame, it was suspicion. You didn't have to dig deep, and honestly, you didn't even have to try that hard to notice that something about him felt off. For decades, stories had quietly circulated through the industry, from his unsettling proximity to young artists like Justin Bieber and Usher, to the eerie and unresolved connections tied to the deaths of Biggie Smalls and Tupac Shakur, to the countless rumors of manipulation, control, and behavior that crossed lines most people wouldn't even approach. And yet, despite all of it, he continued to rise, building an empire so massive that it seemed untouchable, protected not just by wealth but by influence, connections, and a system that thrived on silence. On the surface, he was the blueprint of success, a billionaire mogul, a cultural icon, a man who claimed to have built everything from nothing. But underneath that polished image was a pattern, one that slowly revealed itself over time, piece by piece, like a puzzle that became more disturbing the more complete it got. And when the arrest finally happened, it didn't just confirm what people feared, it opened the door to even darker questions, because suddenly this wasn't about isolated incidents anymore, it started to look like something much bigger, something organized, something that had been operating in plain sight while everyone either ignored it or chose not to see it. To understand how it got to this point, you must go all the way back to the beginning, to a cold night in January 1972, when a man named Melvin Combs sat alone in his car in New York City, unaware that his life was about to end. He wasn't just any man, he was involved in the drug world, connected to powerful figures like Frank Lucas, navigating a dangerous environment where loyalty was fragile and betrayal could be fatal. That night, someone stepped out of the shadows and shot him dead, and just like that, the foundation of Diddy's life was shaped by violence, secrecy, and unanswered questions. Officially, the story was unclear, but rumors suggested that Melvin may have been targeted for cooperating with authorities, a theory that, whether true or not, added another layer of darkness to an already tragic situation. What he left behind was a young son, Sean Combs, who would grow up without a father and without knowing the truth for years, because his mother, Janice, made the decision to protect him from that reality, telling him instead that his father died in a car accident. But hiding the truth doesn't erase its impact, it just delays it, and in many ways, the absence of that truth, combined with the harsh environment he grew up in, became one of the earliest influences on the person he would become. Raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs just to keep the family afloat, Diddy's childhood was anything but stable. There were moments of extreme poverty, times when he was sent to live with relatives in the South Bronx, one of the most underprivileged and dangerous areas in the country at the time, where crime, neglect, and survival were part of everyday life. He later described waking up in conditions so bad that it left a permanent mark on his mindset, fueling a relentless desire to escape, to never be powerless again, to build a life where he controlled everything around him. And that desire, that hunger, became one of the defining traits of his personality, not just ambition, but an obsession with control, with dominance, with never being in a position where he could lose. His mother tried to steer him in a different direction, raising him with discipline, religion, and structure, even managing to get him into a private Catholic school, Mount St. Michael Academy, hoping it would provide a safe and stable environment. But years later, that same school would be exposed in abuse scandals involving its leadership, raising deeply unsettling questions about the environment he was surrounded by during his formative years. While there's no confirmed link to him directly, the existence of such an environment adds context to a larger pattern, because psychological studies have long suggested that cycles of power, control, and abuse often have roots in early exposure, whether directly experienced or indirectly observed. As he grew older, Diddy began to channel that ambition into the music industry, quickly making a name for himself not just as someone talented, but as someone relentless. His time at Uptown Records showed just how quickly he could rise, starting as an intern and becoming a key figure in artist development within a remarkably short time, working with names like Mary J. Blige and Jodeci, helping shape the sound of an entire era. But even during this early stage, there were signs of the darker traits that would later define him, accounts of him being aggressive, disrespectful, and at times abusive toward employees, creating an environment where success came at the cost of fear and pressure. And then came the City College tragedy in 1991, an event that was supposed to be a charity basketball game but ended in disaster when a crowd surge killed 9 young people. While the situation itself was chaotic and complex, What followed raised even more questions: missing charity funds, conflicting accounts of what happened, and a perception that Diddy was more focused on protecting his image than taking responsibility. It was one of the first major moments where the gap between his public persona and private actions became impossible to ignore. At the same time, his personal relationships began to draw attention, particularly his connection with a young Usher, who was sent to live with him at just 14 years old. On paper, it was framed as mentorship, an opportunity for growth and exposure to the industry, but it raised serious concerns about boundaries, responsibility, and the environment a teenager was being placed into. Years later, Usher himself would speak in ways that hinted at discomfort, describing the experience as something he wouldn't wish on his own child, leaving behind more questions than answers. And this pattern, of power imbalance, of control over younger individuals, of blurred lines between guidance and exploitation, continued to surface in different forms throughout Diddy's career. His rise alongside Biggie Smalls brought him even more influence, turning Bad Boy Records into a dominant force, but it also introduced a new level of complexity, with financial control, publishing rights, and personal dynamics creating tension beneath the surface. When Biggie was murdered in 1997, the tragedy sent shockwaves through the industry, but it also intensified speculation, with some insiders questioning the nature of their relationship and whether everything was as it seemed behind the scenes. While nothing was ever proven, the fact that such theories gained traction at all speaks to the reputation Diddy had already built by that point. And then there was the case of Shyne, a young artist whose life took a devastating turn after a nightclub shooting incident in 1999. While multiple accounts and witnesses created confusion about what really happened, what stood out most was the outcome. Diddy walked free, while Shyne was sentenced to years in prison, a result that many viewed as a clear example of how power operates, protecting those at the top while sacrificing those below. Even years later, Shyne himself described the situation as something that destroyed his life, reinforcing the idea that Diddy's relationships were often transactional, driven by what benefited him the most rather than any sense of loyalty or responsibility. Over time, these incidents stopped looking like isolated events and started forming a pattern, one that painted a picture of a man who prioritized control, profit, and power above everything else. Artists became assets, connections became leverage, and the line between success and exploitation became increasingly blurred. As the years went on, the allegations only grew more serious, shifting from rumors and industry gossip to legal claims involving abuse, coercion, and exploitation on a scale that was difficult to comprehend. And when the federal case finally came into play, it didn't just target an individual, it hinted at a network, a system that had allowed this behavior to continue unchecked for decades. Which brings us back to the present, where the biggest question isn't just what Diddy did, but how he was able to do it for so long without consequences. Who knew? Who stayed silent? And how many people were part of a system that prioritized power over truth? Because at its core, this isn't just the story of one man's downfall, it's a reflection of an entire industry, one where influence can shield even the darkest actions, where success can rewrite narratives, and where the truth can remain hidden until it's too big to ignore. And now that everything is finally coming to light, the only thing more disturbing than the allegations themselves is the realization that this might just be the beginning of a much bigger story.